Hey, it's Deborah, independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up. This is the simple "O Come All Ye Faithful" Christmas card I shared a couple of days ago, and in this video I will share with you how to step it up a little bit and mass produce it. This sample is with the Whisper Right piece cut at 3 3/4 by 5 on the front piece and some faux stitching around the edges with white gel pen. And then our next sample has silver embossing done on the Night of Navy panel, popped up on some dimensionals with 1/8 inch silver glitter paper down there across the bottom. In this sample we have the silver cording from the holiday catalog, however that's on back order, so I also have an option of 1/8 inch silver ribbon for you. So let's go ahead and get started creating these cards. So we're going to make the Night of Navy with silver embossed cards, and we're going to make 4 of them. We can make 4 cards using 3 sheets of Night of Navy cardstock and 1 sheet of Whisper Right cardstock. If we do the silver glimmer paper, it's about 1/8 of an inch by 5 inches, so you'll get quite a few pieces of that from 1/12 by 12. If you do the Whisper White and Night of Navy cards, then you get 2 cards from 1 sheet of Night of Navy and 1 sheet of Whisper White. To do the 1/8 inch strip of paper, you can use an extra sheet of paper or some scrap, or you can trim your Whisper White paper in the appropriate places and then layer them appropriately on your card front, and you'll have the card base showing through those 2 pieces. I hope that makes sense. So let's set those aside and grab those 8.5 by 11 pieces of Night of Navy. Putting the 11 inch side up at the top to 5.5 inches, we're going to score with the light gray scoring tool of the trimmer to 2 sheets of Night of Navy cardstock. Then we're going to turn it and put the 8.5 side up to 4 1/4 inches so that we can cut with the dark gray blade of the trimmer, and we will get 4 card bases doing that. Now we're going to take that last sheet of Night of Navy cardstock and we're going to place the 8.5 inch side up at the top to 3 3/4, and we will cut 2 strips that are 3 3/4 wide. Then turn it so that the 11 inch side is up at the top and trim that to 5 inches. So we'll get 2 pieces from that. Grab that other strip, put that to 5 inches, cut, and put that last piece to 5 inches and cut. That gives us the 4 front panels for our cards. Now the Whisper White piece, 8.5 inch side up at the top to 4 inches. We're going to cut 1 strip of that and then slide it over to 4 inches again and cut that. Then we will turn that so that the 11 inch side is up at the top, and we will cut that to 5 1/4 and slide that over 5 1/4 again. Then we'll get that other strip 5 1/4 again 2 more times, and that gives us the 4 inner panels that we need for our card.
Now this is my glimmer paper. I tend to put it face down. I think it's a little easier on my blade when I do that, and 1/8 of an inch is difficult to find here because, as you can see, it's kind of hidden. So I just see how big my paper is, and then I just move that 1/8 of an inch. So I'm using this side of the ruler to determine my 1/8 of an inch, and then we'll cut that.
And so then we have that long strip, and when it's that narrow of a strip, it's difficult to cut with the trimmer, so I'm just going to fold it kind of in half, and with my scissors clip it into 2 pieces. And then when we put it on the card, we'll just trim off the excess. Now we'll cut a couple pieces of the 1/8 inch silver ribbon. We're going to cut it about 5.5 inches long. You can cut it a little bit longer if you'd like. The 2 ends are going to wrap around the front card panel and adhere to the back side of it. Makes it look a little nicer. I'm not sure if I'll put a bow or whatever on it, so we'll wait and see what we do. Now I need the Stamp-A-Majig so I can get perfect placement of my stamps, because the stamps I'm using are not photopolymer, so I cannot see through them and get them into the perfect place and straight. So we're going to use Night of Navy ink and ink up the shepherd with the sheep stamp and stamp it into the corner of the imaging sheet. Just makes it a lot easier to get my images right where I want them. We're going to go ahead and do the envelopes first. I have 4 envelopes. All I want is the shepherd with the 1 sheep. So I'm going to line up my image where I need it to and ink that up with the Night of Navy. And then we will just stamp that, and when we lift up the stamp, my little shepherd will be in the right place, and just him, not that extra sheep. So we're going to do that to all 4 of the envelopes. I like having envelopes that coordinate with my cards. I think it gives it a nice added touch and really makes them smile when they take it out of their mailbox. Okay, so now we will stamp the 4 inside panels of our card. They're 4 by 5 1/4 pieces of Whisper White. We're going to place the shepherd with his sheep in the bottom left-hand corner using the Stamp-A-Majig. That helps us get perfect placement. It also makes stamping go a little bit quicker and easier because I know and trust that I've got great placement. Okay, so we want to make sure that the imaging sheet for the Stamp-A-Majig is clean, and we're going to ink up the sentiment for the inside of the card with Night of Navy ink. You might remember if you watched the Simple All Ye Faithful card that I put all of my images onto the imaging sheet. That increases your risk of getting smudges onto your paper because as you're moving the imaging sheet around, you can smear the ink, getting it on your fingers and then getting on your cardstock. So I do actually prefer, especially if I'm making multiple cards, of doing 1 image at a time on my Stamp-A-Majig. So we're going to get perfect placement for our sentiment on the inside panel in the bottom right hand corner next to the shepherd and his sheep, and get all 4 panels stamped. Okay, so now we will take the 4 panels that we just finished stamping, and with a Stampin' Sponge piece, we're going to sponge some Night of Navy ink on the edges of each panel. I think that gives it a nice look and softens the edge a little bit. You don't have to. This is purely optional. When we're done sponging the edges of our cardstock, we're going to use the Night of Navy ink to stamp "Oh Come All Ye Faithful" onto the imaging sheet. Be sure to clean your stamp when you're done with that because we'll be using Versamark, and you want to keep your Versamark ink pad clean. Using the embossing buddy, we're going to wipe some powder on our cardstock. That will get rid of any extra oils, static electricity, etc., because we want the embossing powder to only stick to the Versamark ink. So once we get our sentiment right where we want it, we're going to go ahead and stamp that with the Versamark ink, and we'll do all 4 panels. Make sure you use that embossing buddy on each panel and ink it up real good with the Versamark and stamp that. Just when you set them aside, don't set them on top of each other. You don't want to smudge your Versamark ink or anything like that. Okay, so we're going to get a piece of scratch paper, place that underneath our cardstock, and the silver embossing powder. We'll just sprinkle that on top of the stamped image and flick off the extra powder. We'll do that to all 4 panels, setting them aside but not on top of each other. If you notice you have some embossing powder where you did not want it to be, using a small dry paintbrush to just wipe it away works wonderfully. And then when we are all done, we will just pour that extra powder back into the container and put the lid on it. So we're going to use a heat tool to melt the embossing powder. I usually let the heat tool heat up a little bit before I set it near the embossing powder, and once that embossing powder starts to melt, I just kind of move along with the heat tool, and it's just so much fun to watch melt. It turns it from a powder to kind of a liquidy, and then it cools. So you want it to cool before you touch it, otherwise it will smear and you'll want to redo it. But look how stunning that is. It's a lot of fun to watch embossing powder melt. Okay, so let's use Night of Navy ink to stamp Jesus and his parents onto the imaging sheet. Be sure to clean the stamp after this so that your Versamark ink pad stays clean. Using that embossing buddy to the upper left-hand corner and our imaging sheet to get perfect placement of our image where we want it, and then ink it up with Versamark ink. And basically we're going to follow the same steps that we did with the O Come All Ye Faithful. We're going to do that to all 4 panels, embossing buddy, Versamark, etc. Be sure that when you set them aside, you don't set them on top of each other. You don't want any smudged images. Now we're going to get that scratch paper and silver embossing powder and just sprinkle them onto Jesus, tapping off the extra powder. And then when we're done with that, we'll pour that powder back into the jar, and it's time to heat set it. I just really enjoy watching the powder turn to the silver. It's just so much fun. I could watch it all day. You can see it here in the video, how pretty that is. And it doesn't take long when you allow your heat tool to heat up well before you approach it to the paper. The wise men have been stamped on the imaging sheet with that Night of Navy ink. Using that embossing buddy in the upper right hand corner, we're going to use Versamark ink to stamp that image. We're going to do all 4 panels the same way we did the previous stamped images. Embossing buddy, Versamark, stamp, place it to the side, not on top of each other, embossing buddy, Versamark, ink, stamp, etc. until we are ready to add the embossing powder. Just wanted to note how easy the Stampin' makes it. There's no guesswork. Once you do a few of them, then you kind of get used to where you need to place it, and it happens a lot quicker. Now with our scratch piece of paper and embossing powder, we're going to get that silver embossing powder onto our Wiseman, flicking off that extra so we can get ready to heat set it and make it shine. Pouring that extra powder back into the container. It's interesting, you can really tell the difference between the heat embossed powder and the powder that's waiting to be embossed. Now here comes the fun. This has been sped up quite a bit, but I just really enjoy watching that powder turn to the silver shiny stuff. It just is really stunning and so much fun. So now we have 2 of our panels, and we're going to take some of the multi-mono liquid combo glue and add just a little bit to the back of one of the 1/8" strips of glimmer paper, and we're going to try to get that as straight as can be. Using that grid paper helps a little bit. I got a little bit of extra glue, so I just wipe that off. I'm going to do that to both pieces, and then we will trim them. You don't want to use a lot of glue because it does squirt out, so just be careful with the liquid glue. So now we'll take our scissors and just trim them off the back so that they are the perfect length. Okay, now with the other pieces of Night of Navy cardstock with the silver embossed, we're going to take some tear and tape, place it on the back side down near the bottom so that when the 1/8" ribbon is placed on it, it'll wrap around the back and stick to that adhesive. So here we're just going to put it down near the bottom, try to get that straight, and just wrap it around with our fingers and then press it into the tear and tape adhesive. It's a good strong adhesive that holds the ribbon well. Then on the back side, I'm going to add a little bit of extra adhesive just to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. I tend to do more adhesive than I need to, so that's just going to cover up that ribbon, make sure it stays in place. Now I'm going to take my card bases, and I really enjoy stamping one of the images from the Better Than Email photopolymer stamp set, and so I'm going to stamp From My Heart to Yours on the back of my card bases there. So that's going to be on the left side, because when I fold my card base, that will be the back of the card. I don't need to add any cushion because I'm using my grid mat from Stampin' Up. It gives me enough cushion with the photopolymer. Now we're going to go ahead and fold up the card bases and burnish them with the bone folder. Okay, so we're going to adhere the 4 Wistful Bright panels to the inside of the card with snail adhesive. I'm going to make sure that my From My Heart to Yours is on the bottom of the card base on the back, so don't want to do it upside down. So I'm going to place each one into there and be ready to do the front panel. Now we're going to take one of the front panels, one with the 1/8" ribbon, and I'm just going to do this one flat with the snail. I'm going to remove that tear and tape backer just to help it stay in place a little bit nicer, and that's going to be centered, and that's a flat one. Then I'm going to take one of the glitter paper ones and do that flat with the snail, just so you can kind of see the difference in them. It looks nice as well, and that's going to be centered on there. So on the second glitter stripped one, we're going to put some dimensionals on the back. I'm doing about 8 of them. I just don't want any areas to sag. Like I said, I tend to do too much adhesive, but it makes me happy. So we're going to center that on the front of the card base as well, and then take one of the 1/8 inch ribbons panels and do the same thing with the dimensionals for that one. Center that on the card base. Okay, so I'm going to tie a bow. I'm not good at it at all, so I'm going to use the fork to help me. I'm going to get however much I think I need and trim that, and it's wrapped around the fork. I hope you can see that. Just wrap it around, and I'm going to take the back one across the front one and down underneath it through that middle open section. Then take the front one up to the top through that middle section, and I'm going to flip my fork over and tie a knot. And then I'll slide the bow off of the fork. I hope that made sense to you. I've learned this from a few other YouTube tutorials. So, and there's my little bow. So I'm just going to mess around with the bow, get the tails kind of at the angle I want, and then with my scissors trim them down a little bit to make them shorter. And then I'm just going to see what it looks like, and we'll get a glue dot and just place that bow onto the middle of the card, and then I'll trim the little tails a little bit more. This kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like without a bow, but I'm going to go ahead and take a scrap piece of the ribbon and do like a square knot on it, just for a little added something special, but you don't have to do that. And I'm just going to trim it with my scissors to get it to the length that I want. So let's go ahead and take a look at the cards that we made. Here are the ribbon ones with the bow and the square knot, and then we'll take a look at the one with the glimmer strip. I made 20 of these in approximately 4 hours, and that's doing the mass production techniques of every step completely as we go through. And this one has the silver cording, which, like I said, is on back order until the middle of December, and it is being retired. So when they run out of the order they're getting in, it's gone. Here's the simple version with the slightly stepped up version, and then the coordinating envelope. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to sharing more projects, so please subscribe so you'll get notified.